I find the responses to Compliance, the film by Craig Zobel, to be very interesting because human beings have different responses to the same thing. And those who've seen the film have very strong responses to it. I don't think it's a film that you can come away with an opinion that's mixed. It's a film that you either like and are very much fascinated by, intrigued by, or it's a film that completely turns you off. I don't think there's any middle ground with this film, which is based, by the way, on a true story that occurred back in 2004 at a McDonald's restaurant in Mount Washington, Kentucky. And a young woman was subjected to some very harsh abuse. She was actually an employee of the McDonald's and the subject of an ABC News primetime special that aired in 2005 and can be found on YouTube. I don't want to even disclose the link or anything like that. It's actually very easy to find. But actually, if you look at the film Compliance actually is almost a verbatim account of that particular broadcast on ABC primetime back in 2005. In fact, remarkably similar. But still, even if you do watch that video, and I perhaps would say to you not to even see that video until you've watched the film that Craig Zobel's directed, even if you do ignore my advice and see that YouTube clip before you go and see Compliance, nothing will prepare you for just how disturbing Craig Zobel's film is. It's 90 minutes long, which isn't very long at all, but it seems as if the film goes on for a lot longer than that. Craig Zobel has put together a remarkable cast. Ann Dowd plays Sandra, the restaurant manager at a fictional restaurant called Chickwich. It's a busy night at the fast food restaurant. It's set in Ohio. Sandra is telling the troops that they have to do very, very well on a night like this. There's a mystery shopper coming in, and there's been problems already that I won't even go into. But all she tells her young employees is to be very careful and alert and get to work. And then a police officer calls claiming to be Officer Daniels. Pat Healy plays him, and Pat Healy's character has accused Dreamer Walker, who is a young 19-year-old woman, blonde-haired woman, working at the Chickwich, accuses Becky, is the name of the character that Dreamer Walker plays, of theft, stealing an amount of money from a woman's purse, a woman who apparently had shopped or who had bought food from Chickwich in that very same day. In fact, literally an hour or so before the accusation is called in. And there's a request to detain Becky by Sandra, or Sandra's told to do this via Officer Daniels over the telephone. She complies, and then from there, a lot of other things happen that get to be a lot worse. And that is really where this film goes to. And it's funny to me because I think that the responses are very, very interesting. Even people who claim that the characters are foolish seem to be very dismissive of the fact that this has really happened, not just in Mount Washington, Kentucky, but in more than 70 other cases around the United States. It happened in fast food restaurants and even in record stores and other types of stores. And in various parts of the country, not just in one part of the country. And even those people who don't think the people who have engaged in these types of behaviors by following orders over a telephone, even if those people don't regard the people who follow the orders as stupid people, they do say, well, it's because these things happened in the Midwest or in another part of the country where presumably people aren't as well educated. Well, I submit to all of the people who hold that view that there are any number of very well-educated people that get scammed. In fact, I make the case that it is easier to scam a well-educated person than it is to scam someone who isn't as well-educated. I tend to believe that a lot of the people who are not necessarily well-educated do have a strong sense of street smarts and instinctual common sense behavior and instinctual common sense in general, and be quick to use it, I think. Whereas people who in general tend to be more educated may not necessarily always be quick to do so. Now, that seems to be counterintuitive, but there is such a thing as an educated fool. And I certainly believe that educated fools exist in the world. And you can point to any number of situations where educated people have been fooled. You can look at the Iraq War, where some of the people who were most vocally in support of that war were people who had college degrees and even postgraduate degrees. And people who have been scammed have not just been poor, but also been very well off. Look at what happened in the true story of a wealthy Manhattanite couple who were scammed by a man claiming to be the son of Sidney Poitier. And I may have mentioned this in previous podcasts of the compliance discussion. This is part 3, by the way. That a real-life scam took place where a very wealthy couple living in Manhattan, I believe it was on the Upper West Side, or maybe the Upper East Side, were scammed by a man claiming to be the son of Sidney Poitier. Now, if this couple had been aware of this, Sidney Poitier does not have any sons. He has only daughters. I believe he has 3 daughters. He may have 2, he may have 4. I don't remember the exact number that he has. And that couple was scammed by this man. In fact, this was turned into a Broadway play written by John Guare, and then later turned into a film starring Will Smith. And Will Smith was very good in the film as the scam artist. And the film and the play were both called 6 Degrees of Separation. You may remember that back in the 1980s, and that's when this particular scam really took place in New York City. So there are any number of instances where people get scammed all the time. Now, is that wealthy couple stupid because they believed that the man calling himself one of Sidney Poitier's sons was indeed Sidney Poitier's son? I think it's very easy to dismiss people who are gullible or ready to believe something as stupid. I don't actually think there's such a thing as a stupid person, which may sound weird to some of you listening to this. But I don't think there's necessarily such a thing as a stupid person. I think there's such a thing as an uninformed person, and if, in your parlance, an uninformed person is stupid, then there you are. That's what you call them. But I don't believe there's something or such thing as a stupid person. Now, do people do stupid things? Absolutely they do. Human beings do stupid things, yes. And perhaps you will say that what happened in these cases around the country in the United States with these fast food restaurants where there were scams being committed over the phone and people in these restaurants following orders, yeah, maybe you call them foolish for following those things. And I don't know, maybe there's a fine line between foolish and stupid. But I don't think people are stupid people. I do think people lack common sense and critical thinking, and that leads them to do things that may be characterized as stupid, or at least foolish, lacking common sense. Compliance goes deeper than that, though, as a film, and Compliance really probes what is it about the human condition, about human nature itself, that allows a person to somehow follow orders, even by following orders of someone that they can't even see. And that's the disturbing thing, and that's what makes, I think, people walk out of the theater when they see this film. I've seen the film 3 times now, and each time at least one person has walked out. The third time I saw the film, and this was in a press screening, all press, all journalists, all film critics, and it was only 8 film critics, including myself, at the screening. Low attendance on the screening. But believe it or not, one of the film critics or press people walked out. So there's something about this film that makes people very uncomfortable. And I think some of the discomfort gets easily pushed to the side for those who endure the 90 minutes all the way through. It gets easily dismissed as, well, these people are stupid. Well, no, maybe that's your way of distancing yourself from a film that doesn't allow the audience to distance itself at all from its events. In fact, it's like an experiment itself. We know the Milgram experiments of 1961 that Mr. Zobel has in the background, I guess, or as a larger overarching theme of his film. That's a template that the film jumps off from. But the fact that people look at authority in such a powerful way in America, I think, speaks to a lot of where the discomfort comes from. Because every day, you and I, and many others listening to this, follow orders, and we don't even think about it. We cross the street when the light says green, and many of us don't even look at the cars at the intersection. We just walk straight across the pedestrian crossing, not even thinking that a car would drive through a red light and hit us. Yet it happens. We're so conditioned by what that green light says or by what that stoplight says that we expect that when we have the green light to cross a street, that the cars will stop at the red light that they're supposed to stop at. And yet, many of us are buried in our iPhones or busy not even looking and making eye contact with drivers, and these drivers are all too often ready to run a stop sign or a red light. And that's really something, that's compliance too. And it's not even an authority figure, it's a red light or a green light that's the authority. And that's not much authority at all. It's a very important signal, but yet the point I'm trying to make here is that it doesn't even have to be someone you have to see. It doesn't even have to be someone you have to hear. In the case of Officer Daniels, played very well by Pat Healy, over the phone in compliance. It can be a traffic light or a stop sign, and you obey that sign. And you should obey that sign because it's something that can save your life, but you should also keep your wits about you and look around you as you cross a street, as you walk across a sidewalk or across a road. You should look. You shouldn't just follow the light and think, oh, the green light gives me the green light to cross the road and walk. I can walk. Or the walk sign says walk. I can walk. Well, you don't just rely on walking because the sign says so. You should be looking at the traffic and keeping eye contact with the drivers as you cross. And to me, that's an everyday compliance. A lot of people who don't look at drivers when they cross the street, when they walk across, that's a form of compliance too. It's very innocuous, but it's also very substantial. And Compliance is the kind of film that taps into these everyday foibles and flaws and small little things in our human mechanism and psychology, that allows us to make these types of everyday nanosecond decisions. And I think that when we're at a workplace and we listen to a colleague make a racist comment or a sexist comment, oftentimes we are so shocked we don't respond. Yet we should respond. I know this has happened to me. I know it's happened to many people. And yet we think, why on earth didn't we say something? Why on earth didn't we do something? Well, that's the same type of thing that goes on in Compliance, that some of us readily dismiss after we watch the film. And we say, oh, why didn't they say something? Well, there are instances in your own life where you have probably wondered, well, why didn't you say something? Why didn't I say something when someone made a sexist or racist comment or an offensive joke about a religious group? Why didn't I say something to stop that? Why didn't I do something? And the characters in this film are in the same boat. They register objections. Some of them are very animated, and then yet nobody really seems to affirmatively put a stop to anything that happens. Now, I'm not going to give anything away, and I will not spoil Compliance because it's a film that needs to be seen. It's well acted, it is well directed, it's excellently scored music-wise by Heather McIntosh. Does a wonderful job of the score. The editing is very crisp and very good. The cinematography by Adam Stone is wonderful. And there are some very great performances here. Ann Dowd in particular as Sandra, who I think merits an Oscar nomination for her work. It's a small independent film, is Compliance, and I only hope that the Academy does themselves a huge favor and go into a theater and watch this film. Now, it's an uncomfortable film, be warned. It is a highly disturbing experience at times to watch. And I do challenge people to stay and sit through the entire 90 minutes. No blood is shed, I can say that to you, and that's not spoiling anything. There's no blood shed in this film, but it is at times an extremely intense experience to watch. It may produce anger, it may provoke you, it may get you frustrated and flustered, but one thing this film is not is a cheap exercise or an exploitive one. It's a very clever, sophisticated movie. And I do urge you to sit through this great film. I think it's the best film so far of 2012, and I think ultimately Compliance is the best film of the year, and there's still a few months of 2012 yet left for us to digest the big film schedule that's ahead. And you may hear a siren in the background as I talk to you. Someone in distress. Well, I don't know if it's Becky at the restaurant at Chickwich, but I can tell you that siren gets louder here and louder by the very moment. And that is also your clarion call, your siren, your wake-up call to watch Compliance in theaters August the 17th in the New York City area, and then expanding around the country in the weeks and months to come. This is Omar Moore for the Popcorn Reel at popcornreel.com. That's popcornreel.com. And that siren is your call. Please make a date and see Compliance. It's not a date movie. It is a film that you will be discussing for many days, hours, weeks, perhaps even months to come. Compliance. It is a must-see film. Omar Moore here for the Popcorn Reel. This has been part 3 of a 4-part podcast on the film Compliance, and it's directed by Craig Zobel.